we'll be giving a presentation called What is Conscious Music for our group Light in February.
Okay.
And my first question is, what is conscious music? And do you have a definition for it, or
well, conscious music is a very deep subject. It's got a very ancient history, I suppose, right from the beginning of when human beings started to create sound and saw that it did have an impact on the feelings and the actual actions of human beings in general, but the musicians and also on the audiences. And so conscious music really isn't that well known or even considered to be real in this culture. I mean, everyone thinks that music is conscious, but in the sense that some kind of sound, some kind of arrangement of instrumental melodies can affect a human being or just any being. That's what conscious music is related to. But it's not just in any sort of way that conscious music affects people. It's intended to act upon the consciousness in a uniform way. Let's say there are a dozen people in the room, and we all hear a selection, let's say from piano or from flute or whatever, or from even a vocal, a song. Usually, the impact of that musical piece will be different for every person who hears it.
Yes.
So some people may be saddened by the music. Others might feel indifferent. Others might feel agitated. Others might feel exalted, elated. And that, in most cases, is what music is in the general mainstream.
Okay.
It affects people subjectively.
Yes.
In different ways. Conscious music, on the other hand, is much more objective. It's much more universal. It will, in essence, regardless of what my own preferences are, or someone else's preferences may be, that music will still evoke and act upon me and the others who are listening to it in the same way. It may, let's say, evoke yearning for something greater, for example. It may invoke compassion or even loving kindness or joy. But in all cases, conscious music doesn't just act in a subjective way. It seems to access our essential beings, not just our programmed subjective cultural beings. And so conscious music is quite a rarity when you actually examine how many examples there are of it.
Yes.
Especially in the West. Unfortunately, there's so much, I guess, tied up in commercial success or in the commercialization of music and just making people wealthy or at least able to survive, that the impulses that generate conscious music, such as, like I said, real love, real compassion, real impartiality, balance, real altruistic feelings and actions. What else? Conscience. Those kinds of impulses are intended to be evoked when you hear conscious music, and that really, in a sense, helps whoever's listening to the music and also the one who is playing the music. It helps them to evolve internally. It's like a restart in internal being, if you will. And that in India was known. I mean, it was Nada Brahma, I believe, is what it's called, and it's got to do with the fact that music, and that means not just musical instrumentation and playing of instruments, but the voice, dancing, theater, all of those are part of the harmonic fold of what's known as music there. That whole area of work and discipline in the arts is intended for people, individuals, to help them to perfect themselves,
Yes.
to realize the deepest essential
Right.
nature.
It's interesting you brought up the example of Indian music.
Mm-hmm.
The Indian ragas, for instance, would that be an example?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Well, Indian music especially is rooted in their deepest philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the practices and the yoga. So music itself is a yoga practice. It's a practice of first having this implement, if you will, this instrument that seems to be separate from yourself, become kind of a conveyor of what your present situation is, spiritually, if you will. It becomes your partner. It becomes your spiritual work partner.
Yes.
And so as you progress in becoming familiar with the instrument and then learning to master the instrument technically until you become virtuosic, as they say, that's just the first level of it. Once you've gained virtuosity in the instrument, then that instrument becomes like your most intimate partner. I know of many musicians who are practicing this, who can't be away from their instruments. They have to play their instrument every day, or something doesn't feel right, because it is a kind of a very deep sort of marriage that's involved between the performer and the instrument. And so with that kind of relationship, it's hardly appropriate to think of it in terms of monetary gain or personal success even. It's got to do with how we are able to live, truly live, and then go out into the world and sort of be present that way, and to sort of, I don't know, just by living be an example to everyone else of that kind of harmony, of that kind of integrity, that kind of unity of being.
It's almost a spiritual sadhana.
It is.
That path itself.
That is exactly it in the classical Indian traditions. Yes, it is. And so, but I mean, there are other cultures too, and I've come across this in many different places where there is this kind of deep integrative relationship with the instrument and the performer and the audience.
Yes. In more modern times, are you familiar with the music of Gurdjieff and Hartman?
Oh.
And would they fall in this
Oh,
category?
yes, that was a very, very interesting combination, if you will. But there's one more person involved with that, I believe. And so Gurdjieff and de Hartman are a very special case of what conscious music is. Of course, George Gurdjieff was a known teacher and mystic, and he had an incredible ability to retain patterns, whether they were patterns on carpet weaving, whether they were patterns in movements and dances, or whether they were patterns in musical form. His memory was incredible. So when he did his travels throughout Central Asia and into the East, he heard many, many different varieties of these traditions, both folk and sacred. And he was able to carry these melodies with him. And when he met who became a student Thomas D. Hartmann, who was like a full-scale, accomplished Western composer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he would have been a very great, well-known public composer had he sort of wanted to go that way.
Yeah.
But he decided to. Obviously, he didn't decide. I think he was drawn to Gurdjieff and to the implications of the teaching that Gurdjieff was at that time transmitting, and with him, the two of them did kind of almost like a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, it was a collaboration on the highest level.
Yeah, it was.
They both needed each other.
They were. I mean, Gurdjieff wasn't per se an accomplished musician. D. Hartmann certainly was.
Mm-hmm.
A very high-level player and composer. And but the thing is that Gurdjieff had that presence of being. He was hooked into the source of the intention of the music in the first place. Mm-hmm. So Gurdjieff was kind of like the grounding principle in what the music was going toward. It was establishing. Gurdjieff's presence established the aim of the music in the first place.
Yes. And
where it was going. D. Hartmann was able to translate that into Western notation from all these different cultural perspectives, and what we have of their work is an incredible, almost unique category of music. It is Western in style. It's got symphonic and pianistic elements, a lot of it, but the overall content of it, the overall direction that those pieces take one is almost, it's not even known of in Western music, except in a few rare instances.
Right.
And so I myself have obviously been looking for a lot of these instances, and there really aren't that many.
Can you name a few others other than Gurdjieff and Hartmann?
Well,
contemporary or classical?
Well, I think, for example, when Debussy was at his most lucid,
mm-hmm.
I think that would be someone who was definitely being drawn toward that stream of conscious intention in the music itself, whether he was involved directly with any kind of school of conscious music, I'm not certain, but yeah, there are many individuals.
Mozart, Bach, would you consider them?
Bach, yes.
Bach, yes.
Not so much Mozart.
Okay.
I would say maybe Rachmaninoff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there was one individual I'd like to mention who was contemporaneous with Gurdjieff and D. Hartmann, and whom I think actually did directly contribute mm-hmm. to the Gurdjieff, what's known as the Gurdjieff-D. Hartmann music, and that was Gomidas. Gomidas was a patriarch of the Armenian church, but he had discovered a very ancient form of musical notation. And I do believe that in one of his books, I think either it's Boyhood with Gurdjieff or one of the others, or I think Our Life with Gurdjieff too. Yeah, that's right, Our Life with Mr. Gurdjieff, the De Hartmann's book, yes. Relating to their experiences with Gurdjieff. D. Hartmann was very excited about Gomidas because he does mention Gomidas to Gurdjieff, mm-hmm. and that this is definitely a person that should. Fortunately, what happened with Gomidas was that he was almost doing parallel work to Gurdjieff. I say unfortunately because while he was in Constantinople, that's when this insanity broke out, and that what's known as the Armenian Genocide, which is one of the horrendous episodes, once again, of the 20th century. Mm-hmm.